ሓሙሽታይ ወዲና ኢና ሶሪ ዶንጊናኩም ሕጂ ክንጅምር ኢና ሞ ከም መቀፀልታ ናይ አንቶዌዝ ንገብሮ ዝነበርና ዲስከሽን ሓደ ሓፍ አን አወር ዝኸውን ሃፍትና ሴጋል ካብ እስራኤል ነዚ ፕሮግራም እዚ ክትሳተፍ ዝመፀት እያ ሰላም ሞር ኢንትሮዲውስ ክትገብራ እየ ሞ ናባኽና ትዊና ማለት እዩ ቴንክ ዩ
It's such a treat. Sigal. It's so nice to meet you again. I didn't realize it was the same Sigal. So it's nice to meet you. So Sigal, Mike, can you guys hear me? Yeah. Good. Okay. So Sigal is one of Israel's leading social and human rights activists, as far as we Eritreans are concerned. Sigal was one of the main petitioners in Israel to the Israel Supreme Court in what was ultimately a successful effort to hold the expulsion of asylum seekers, including thousands of Eritreans, in 2018. She continues to work in the field of human rights, working directly in Israel's refugee and asylum-seeking population at a time when their plight is making headlines across the globe. So today she's going to talk to us about that situation. And similarly to what we did earlier on, we're going to try and take the lessons from that and how to not just, how to continue with the struggle, including in supporting them and what we need to do next. So take it away,
Okay.
Sigal.
So thank you for having me. I'm sorry. So thank you for having me, inviting me to speak. On one hand, I'm very happy to be here, but on the other hand, I feel very sad because there's nobody in this room that is coming from Israel. I feel a bit discomfort to speak in the name of the Eritrean community, but as I will explain to you later, and I'm sure most of you know, somebody an Eritrean from Israel cannot leave Israel. So therefore, I think I will try to be their voice, and I will try to speak about my activities. So as Salam said, I am a human rights activist, and I also have here in my room a partner of mine that was also in Israel for many years. He left, now he's in Italy. So I think those that are in Italy should get to know him, Dr. Gilad Lieberman. And we took the struggle for the asylum seekers to the farthest that we could. Salam and I told her that I think we met sometime before, and I started my activity in the Eritrean Women Community Center in Israel, in Tel Aviv, when it first opened. I did not know a lot about the Eritrean community, nor did I know about the Sudanese community. Those are the two asylum seeker communities that we have in Israel. And I'm saying asylum seekers because none of them has been recognized, or hardly any of them has been recognized as a refugee. I'd like to speak about a little bit about what's happening in Israel. Israel has initiated in 1950s, after the Second World War, has the nation that initiated the Refugee Convention. It also has authorized it or signed it, agreed to it, but it hasn't embedded it in its laws. Israel was kind of a spoiled state in the world because Israel never suffered. Israel has created a lot of refugees, speaking about the Palestinian refugees, but Israel never had to deal with refugees coming into Israel. When we know that all the countries around us did, whether it's Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, of course, accepting a lot of our refugees, but we never had to deal with refugees. At the beginning of 2006, refugees started coming into Israel, not because they chose to come in, because they had no choice. I don't know if any of you are familiar with what happened in Egypt with the Sudanese and the South Sudanese community that had to flee after demonstrating in front of the UN. Mustafa, I think it was called the Mustafa, I'm forgetting the name of it. Anyway, they had to flee and they had no other choice other to enter through the Sinai Desert, Israel. So this is the first time that we had to we were starting to deal with refugees. Not a lot of refugees came into Israel. We're talking about less than 64,000 refugees came into Israel altogether between 2006 until 2012. The Eritreans mostly started coming somewhere around 2010 to 2011. Some of them came before, but most of them came during these years. Now, these years, especially after 2011, The situation of the refugees coming into Israel was catastrophic because they went through the Sinai torture camps. A lot of them were, I mean, I don't think anybody didn't go through to the Sinai desert. A lot of them were tortured. We know also that a lot of Eritreans have died in the Sinai desert from the tortures that they had to endure. At the beginning, Israel did not take notice of the fact that people are coming in through their southern border. It didn't seem to matter to anybody, and the numbers were very small. It is important for me to say that what happened during those years is that the soldiers that were witnessing the people coming through the border described horrific things, horrific situations of what they saw on the people that came into Israel. We're talking about a community that came that was very, escaped Eritrea or escaped Sudan and suffered many ordeals on the way. So we're talking about a community that came into Israel and was truly desperate. Israel, in turn, gave these asylum seekers nothing at all. They didn't give them any housing. They didn't give them health insurance. They didn't give them any social benefits. Israel ignored the fact that these people are coming and what they are dealing with. Israel's policy, official policy, was that, they're not really, they didn't even know, they didn't name these people. They called them either work migrants or they didn't name them. The official policy was to ignore them, but the non-official policy from day one was to make these people leave at any cost. So what we had is, in Hebrew, it's called hot returns. The soldiers would return them back to Egypt, and the soldiers would testify that these people would be shot by the Egyptian soldiers, raped, tortured, sent back to jails. So the Israeli soldiers were those who know what was happening. Some of them actually caused this to stop. They came to the government and they said that this is happening and it should stop. But Israel never stopped wanting to cause these people to leave. And when I say 64,000 people enter Israel, there was never 64,000 people all at the same time in Israel. At the peak, we had 53,000 people. So Israel had always caused people to leave or to be despair and leave either through the prison system or any other way that they could. People came in and they were tricked. They were told that they shouldn't ask for asylum seeker. They shouldn't ask to be recognized as asylum seekers, that they would enjoy what you call a group protection. So I know, from my knowledge in Europe, a group protection means giving also all kinds of benefits or security or housing or something. In Israel, they were given nothing. There was one person here that came into Israel, Habtum. He was there till 2015, and he, as he told me, as most asylum seekers, they were after they were in prison, they were sent on a bus to Tel Aviv and thrown in the public garden, and nobody took care of them. Nobody even, nobody gave them food. We started as human rights activists. We started to try and help them with fooding and housing, but in general, these people never received anything. So they were not even allowed to put in a request as asylum seekers. They were denied this. Only through our activism in 2013, we found out that we are able to apply for asylum seeker, but hardly any of these requests were checked. So Israel has a policy of imprisoning people, taxing them, not taxing them even as regular taxes, because each asylum seeker that works in Israel pays taxes more than any Israeli because he doesn't receive any benefits, but also taking 20% of their money, deporting them from within prison, not giving them their papers, even small things like not giving them a visa, a proper visa that they can stay in Israel, not allowing them to work. It goes on and on and on. So the struggle that we had all these years is to try and help the community to survive. Basically, that is all we tried, just to help them survive, to have some sort of roof over their heads, to have an option to work, to have an option not to be deported, and to have an option not to be imprisoned. We had some successes, as you mentioned. In 2018, we created a situation where we had the Israeli public backed us up and prevented the deportation, the forceful deportation that the government has decided on going forward. And we also served the petitions to the Supreme Court, so on. We fought. We really had a struggle all these years for the main basic things. Through all these years, underneath the surface, not even known to us as activists, there was these tensions between supporters and non-supporters. That's how we call them in Israel. Even for me, as an activist, I didn't completely understand this whole issue of supporters and non-supporters. What is the purpose of supporters and non-supporters? And it was even it was weird, because even in the detention center, in Cholot detention center, you had people being sent, and it was very difficult to be in that center. The only thing that helped us being there was it was an open facility center, so-called, that they were allowed to go out to the desert during the day. So we would go down to Cholot almost every Saturday to keep their spirits up, to ask what's happening, to try and come back to the public or to the newspaper outlets, telling them what's happening in Cholot, because the idea of Cholot was being so far away. It's like 2.5 hours drive from Tel Aviv, and Israel is a small country, but still 2.5 hours. It's very difficult. The community itself is not allowed to drive, so therefore the community could not visit their own friends or families. So it was only up to us as Israeli activists to go down, visit, get some update from them. These were very difficult years. But what I wanted to say, that even in that detention center, you had supporters and non-supporters living, trying to live together. So the Israelis, the authorities knew about this issue. They knew about the issue of supporters and non-supporters, and they actually used it. They used it when they put people in this specific, it wasn't a cell, it's most like a container in the middle of a desert, you can imagine it. But they used it, and they put purposely people together in order to create friction, in order to create frustration. I remember one of the Eritreans telling me, even here in Cholot, where they took my freedom, where I'm a nothing, I'm afraid even to speak in my sleep, to utter something maybe against the government, because the supporters are here. So can you imagine the psychological effects of having to deal with that? We knew that there were clashes. We knew about a very violent clashes in 2012. We understood that things are difficult. In 2018, we succeeded to, as I said, to prevent the forceful deportation. What happened is then the tensions between the supporters and non-supporters they all came to surface. There was an incident in the middle of Tel Aviv, in the middle of the day, broad daylight, where they had the supporters running in the streets of Tel Aviv with knives and things like axes, and harming very badly non-supporters. And it was in the middle of the day. I, as an activist, and another friend, an activist, and a lawyer activist, we started to gather the information. We went to the police station with video and with people that were willing to witness to what they saw and give the police names of people, of the supporters that act this way. The police refused to take this information. We sat there from the station for at least 6 hours. And the police did not allow us to, then they didn't want to interview us. They didn't want to interview anybody of the Eritreans that came with us. It was like impossible to break through that glass. I started slowly understanding that Israel has a very great interest in Eritrea's politics. I mean, in what's happening in Eritrea's officials, or whatever it is. First of all, we know that Israel has an Eritrean embassy, and I don't know many places in the world that there is an Eritrean embassy. In Israel, there is an Eritrean embassy, and I even want to emphasize that in 2022, the Israeli embassy in Asmara was closed. And you would think, right, that if one country closed the other country's embassy, the reaction would be to close the embassy back, right? I mean, if Belgium would decide that Israel cannot have an embassy in Belgium, we would probably close the Belgian embassy in Israel. But that didn't happen. There still is an Eritrea embassy in Tel Aviv. And there was I slowly understand. I knew of the fact that I knew about 1 or 2 army bases, Israeli army bases in Eritrea. Now I understand through El Median that there are at least 3. This is something that Israel is keeping a secret. This is something we cannot succeed for the Israeli. We could succeed to cause the Israeli government to claim that these are its bases. We even order some sort of I don't know how to call it. The citizens in Israel are allowed to ask government for questions, and they have to answer the questions. I don't know how it's called, what the act is called. I'm sorry, but we knew that the Minister of Foreign Affairs wrote 4 documents about Eritrea. That's all we knew, and we said, okay, we want to see these 4 documents. We don't know what's in these documents. We understand maybe they're talking about specific roads that you are allowed to travel, not allowed to travel. Remember, this is a document prepared by the Israeli Foreign Affairs. We were told by the court that this is security information and that we will endanger Israel's relationships with the international community if these documents are released. So we understand that Israel is putting everything regarding Eritrea under complete secrecy. And my understanding is that Israel does not want to annoy the dictatorship of Eritrea. Israel does not want to annoy Isaias Afwerki, even though Isaias Afwerki has a very good relationship with Putin and with Iran, kind of not really our best friends, but Israel does not want to annoy Isaias Afwerki, and therefore we will not be able to achieve from the Israeli government any protection from those opposing the government. We will not even be able for the government to charge in court those supporters that have committed crimes. We have been trying to do it in many different ways. You spoke here about freedom of speech. When in last September, I called directly the Minister of Interior. I had spoke to his head of his chief, and I told him that the festival, the so-called Eritrea festival, will cause great difficulties in Israel, that there will be a lot of protests and so on and so forth. I was unable to convince him. The Eritrean community wrote letters to the Minister of Interior, to the head of police. Everybody tried to inform the Israeli officials that what will happen on 2nd of September is going to be a big issue. Personally, I walked on the streets on a Thursday before that Saturday and to the south of Tel Aviv, and I started begging people from the Eritrean community not to go to these demonstrations, because I understood it would end violently. Also, the speakers before me spoke about the fact that, violence isn't to be supported, and it won't. It did create interest, or it brought attention to the issue. But in the Israeli public, at least as far as I know, there was a lot of anger towards the community. There's no understanding of this issue of supporters, non-supporters. They refer to it in the media as tribal fights. I was called in that same day to the newspaper studios, and to try and speak about, not newspapers, to the television studio, to try to speak about this issue. And they completely the head of the police said, I don't want to deal, that's what he told me, I don't want to deal with their tribal issues. And I'm trying to explain, these are not tribal issues. This is, as you call it, transnational oppression. And I tried to say that this is something that Israel has to take notice of. But there is a complete denial. It's not that that the government of Israel does not know. There is complete denial. I must say, for the benefit of the Eritreans in Israel, that they are the bravest of the bravest, really. I'm saying it and I'm choking in my throat. Sorry. They told me on the day before, when they call me Sigali, I know that this is going to be a very intimate issue, because my name is Sigal, and when they say Sigali, when they add this, it says, we're very intimate. And they said, you died for Israelis, for your independence. and we're prepared to die. And they were talking about people that have family members, children. And I feel very sad because it's not going to cause at least the Israeli public there's no recognition of this issue. I tried to convince them to either make demonstrations far away from the event, try and do it by the police station, or try to create public awareness in a different way. And I'm failing each time. I'm failing. There was a few demonstrations only by the women, by the police stations that were very successful, by the way, because first of all, the attention was, the interest was rose, but also these were non-violent demonstrations, but we succeeded bringing the media there, so on and so forth. But it's going to be very, very difficult, at least in Israel, to create some sort of awareness. And there's another thing happening in Israel that is very important for me to say to you today. Through all these years, the people in Israel, the Eritrean people in Israel, suffered greatly from the oppression. I say we have double oppression in Israel. There's not only the Eritrean government oppressing, but also the Israeli government oppressing these people. Because, as I said, they have no recognition, they have no rights, they have nothing. So I think it's really important. And what happened through these years, I'm happy about it, but a lot of Eritreans left Israel. Unfortunately, some of them left to Rwanda and Uganda. I have followed them to Uganda to try to take testimonies in order to share with the Israeli public what these people are going through. But a lot of people have succeeded in these recent years. And again, personally, I'm happy for them to go to Canada or some to Europe and so on and so forth. But what is happening in Israel is that the Eritrean community, and the Sudanese the same, they are losing their leadership. They are losing those that are capable of speaking to the Israeli public. They're losing, for instance, I had a few very good friends, and some of them I'm still in relationship with. For Dejan Mengasha in Canada, he spoke Hebrew beautifully. So it was so good for me to send him to the Israeli newspapers and television shows, and he was very, very precise, and he spoke like an Israeli. And the community, the Israeli public relates to that. That's exactly why, by the way, I started teaching Hebrew for the communities, because I always said to them, it's not that you have to know Hebrew, it will help you, but it's even more than that. If you speak to Israelis in their language, it makes an impact. And this is something I heard from the representatives here saying, you have to be in more contact with the communities that you live in. It's really, really important. In Israel, for instance, a lot of people in the streets that have shops or restaurants or so on, unfortunately, that's the only things that the Eritrean community can work in, but they actually like the Eritrean community. They trust them. I have people telling me, owners of shops, saying, you see, the keys of my shop, I give to the Eritrean. I trust him more than I trust my brother. I always tell people that want to talk to me about the community that they're trying to criminalize them. I always tell people you can walk down Dizengoff, which is the main street in Tel Aviv, in the morning or in the evening, and you can see those who are opening the shops and those who are closing the shops. They're all Eritreans. So the Israeli public is not against the Eritrean community. It's now an issue of a government, mostly a government. Of course, there are racist pockets that are very difficult, but in general, the Israeli public, and as I saw in 2018, I was surprised when I actually asked the Israeli public to help us to stop. People went out to the squares and Israelis protested against this deportation. So you had pilots signing petitions, you had nurses signing petitions, you had doctors, all people of Israeli signed petition against the deportation. So the Eritrean community has succeeded to enter the hearts of Israeli, but we're dealing with a government that has different interests, and I'm sure you know about Netanyahu and his interests in general. Now, what I would recommend the community to do, I don't believe demonstrations are going to help. They're creating friends of mine that are totally supportive of the community. were in neighborhoods that these events took place in the 2nd of September, and they told me it was a war zone. They were afraid to go out. And these are people that are supporting the community. They were shocked. Violence was and I have pictures that I received, and it's really difficult to see. And it happened. The violence occurred on both sides. I must say, I must be honest with you. Violence occurred on both sides. Now I know that the what they call the red shirts, I know they had guns. You can also see it in the video. And I know, and maybe they were even, I don't know if supported, but they were backed by the police, the Israeli police. I know it's not a balanced situation, but my worries is that the view of the Israeli public, of the Eritrean community, as a violent, barbaric, I'm going to say the words that I've been hearing, barbaric, tribal communities. We don't want this in our place. We don't need this. We have our own problems. Before I continue, I just want to say that on the horrific events of 7th October, where the Hamas had committed its atrocities in the south of Israel, the Eritrean community, again, truly, I have only deep respect for this community. The Eritrean community that next morning wore their blue shirts and started helping the Israelis with packages of food and supplies for the south. They went to different agriculture places in the south of Tel Aviv, in the south, not in Tel Aviv, in the south, and they volunteered there, helping with, because all of the foreign workers either unfortunately were kidnapped, killed, or left immediately. But they went there and they helped with the farmers there. And they also had an issue. One of the asylum seekers, Mulgeta, he didn't know he was rescuing, but he rescued one of the high-ranking officers of the army. He rescued him from being murdered by the Hamas while he was endangering himself very dearly. He was somebody that I went to meet later on with this high-ranking officer, very right-wing, unfortunately, but he helped. We succeeded receiving what you call a temporary status or temporary citizenship for Mulgeta. But it was these acts, and I'm saying this because these acts of solidarity with the Israeli public created enormous warm feelings towards the community. It sort of pushed away the memory of what happened just a month before. So I really think it's very important for the communities to be involved with the communities that they live in. It's really, really important. Really, we are all suffering. I mean, Israelis, we're all suffering. So it's important to help. And the other thing is, I think when you're talking about creating awareness of what is happening in Eritrea and what's happening between the supporters and non-supporters, you have so many young people in the community. This is going to be funny, what I'm going to say, funny and cynical. You have to do what the Palestinians are doing. The Palestinians are using TikTok or using the media brilliantly, okay? This is what the Eritreans have to do. They have to create content of what is happening in Eritrea in a way that a lot of people in this world can relate to them, not in Tigrinya, in different languages in the country. It's really, really important. TikTok has proven to be an influencer, sometimes a very negative one, but still an influencer of public's opinions. This is a tool that the community needs to use. It's non-violent, and you can give your messages, and it creates, if pushed strongly, it can create awareness. So thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Not just for presenting here, but for all the work that you do. And the messages are we know the task, guys. ትስራሕ ግሉጽ እንዳሆነ ይመጽኣሎም ሽንታይ ክንገብር ከም ዘለና እቲ gain ገበርናዮ ዓወት ሉዝ ንኸይንገብሮ ክንገብሮ ዘለና ነገር ኣሎ እሱ that will be our discussion. Hopefully it will be the discussion that comes next. If anyone has got one burning question, I would like to take one question from the audience. Just one question. The chair's prerogative.
One question. ኣዝዩ ኣገዳሲ ህትወለድኒ ዝብል ሰብ እንተሎ የለን
Okay.
ኣለካ ህቶ ናና ሽምካን
Hi, ስመይ ፍቁር ካሕሳይ ዝበሃል. Thank you for your involvement in supporting Eritreans in Israel. I've seen your interview in Eri PM, in Erisat as well, and in other medias as well. I really, really appreciate you, and you are passionate about this, and I really thank you. My question is, as Eritreans who are supporting the Blue Revolution, and the Eritreans who are there, anti-government, that they are fighting with us, what can we do outside Israel? I've tried to last month, when there was a tension between the Eritreans there, between supporters and non-supporters, I wrote to Al Jazeera, I wrote to Foreign Minister, I wrote to the embassy in London, I wrote to a lot of places, but the only thing reply I get is just, this is not our issue, so you have to, they will transfer it to another place. Then you write to them, they will transfer it to another place. So what is your suggestion? Thank you.
Is this good?
Go on.
So,
I think it's this one.
so one of the things I keep telling the community, if we're talking about demonstrations, non-demonstrations, I keep telling the community that I think that they should have a demonstration in front of the UNHCR in Israel, which I have a lot of criticism against. But in general, I think that if the community, the international community, the Eritreans all over the world would decide on a day, a specific day, okay, that they are having demonstrations in front of embassies, in front of UNHCRs all across Europe, all across the United States, that will raise a lot of attention. I'm thinking of how to create, having a hashtag thing. This is, by the way, this is something we tried to do, partly successful in 2018 when we wanted to stop the deportation. Again, this is weird, but I asked some of the Palestinians, some of my Palestinian friends around the world to join with the Eritreans and have demonstrations in front of embassies, of Israeli embassies, or sorry, we did it in front of the Rwanda embassy because Israel planned to deport them to Rwanda, to create some sort of interest in the world. If all around the world in the same specific day, a few events will happen, they will start asking questions. You have to think creatively. This is something you have to think about in a creative manner. And you have to remember that, embassies and UNHCRs are very sensitive to their public relationship. If you have a big demonstrations in front of UNHCRs all over the world, this will raise a lot of eyebrows. They will say, why are they all demonstrating? What's the story? And this is a way to get attention. This is a way to have your message crossed, to cross your message out. It's very important to think of different creative things that are non-violent. It's very important, for at least my perspective, that not non-violent. It's, again, listen, Eritrea is a small country. This world is in complete mayhem. Israel itself now is focused on its own wars. But things like that do create interest. So this is one of my ideas. I think we can think, we can think groups of different ways, but this is something, it's not enough for you to speak to Al Jazeera or to speak to, and it's this, they have to come to you. That's basically when I wanted to convey the idea of the deportation is very dangerous. Okay, it was very hard for me to tell Israelis that we're talking about people in Eritrea and Sudan, and they're going to end up deporting to Rwanda and to Uganda, and they're ending up in Libya. So I was thinking how I'm going to create interest, and what I did is I say a mock sale auction. I took Eritreans and Sudanese to the middle of Tel Aviv on a Friday, which is the busiest day, and we had them stripped naked from their chain them up and saying, okay, we're selling slaves. Why do we need to send them to Libya in order to sell them? Let's buy them here cheaper or whatever, or there's still pressure. It created a lot of people were annoyed at us. People were upset at us, but this is what reached the newspaper. So we always thinking of events that create a situation where the reporters are going to come after us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Segal, for having from Israel to share us your experience and knowledge. I don't think half an hour is enough to get the most out of you. My colleague Howard will be in touch with you soon, and we'll work together.
שלום, שלום, מה שלומך? מרחבה, כן, תודה רבה. ברוכים הנמצאים. Those that are here
I don't know more than that because I had a patient and unfortunately I was treating my patients because I was working with the hospital.
ናብ ዝቀፅል ፕሮግራምና ክንሰግር ኢና ብዛዕባ ይኣክል ካብ ዝጅመር ዘሎ ስጋ ሕጂ ንኸዶ ዘለና ፅባሁን ኣብ ወርክሾፕ ክንትንክፎ ኢና ግን ሪፍሌክት ጌርና ከመይ መፂና እንታይ ፀገማት ነይሩና ከመይ ኣለና ሕጂ ከም ይኣክል ከም ምንቅስቃስ ብድህሪ ሕጂ ኸናበይ ገፅና ኢና እንታይ ክንገብር ኣለና ዝብል ዲስከሽን ክነካሄድ ኢና ዳንኤልን ገለ ኣባላት ፈፀምቲ ናብ ቅድሚት መድረክ ተትወፁ ዳንኤል መምህር ፀጋይ ኤለን ኣወት Abraham. Dr. Thomas. Out أبيلها ندلي كلنا. زيوم يوم راحتنا زي تفلتوا من تلوكم تفعلتوا أو تابلو
كان زورينا هو
Just 1 minute.